Picture yourself in a medieval village, the air thick with the scent of wood smoke and damp earth. It's a world without drive-thrus or corner stores, yet somehow people still craved a quick, indulgent bite, something to make the day feel less like a slog through mud and misery. Welcome to the greasy, glorious world of medieval junk food, where snacks were as inventive as they were questionable. You're about to embark on a journey through the tastes and textures that kept peasants nobles and even stray dogs coming back for more. So settle in, maybe crack open a window for that soothing evening breeze, and let's dive into a time when fast food meant dodging a cart to grab something fried. Oh, and if you're enjoying this, smash that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment with where you're listening from. London at midnight, Tokyo at dawn. I'm curious. Let's start with a crowd favourite, the apple fritter. The medieval answer to a donut minus the sprinkles and plus a whole lot of grit. Imagine you're at a bustling market, the kind where merchants shout over the clang of a distant blacksmith's hammer. You spot a vendor hunched over a bubbling cauldron of pig fat, the air shimmering with heat, and the sharp tang of sizzling batter. That's where the magic happens. Apples small tart and often pilfered from a neighbour's scraggly tree get diced into rough chunks. No pristine supermarket fruit here. These are knobby worm-kissed survivors of a harsh season. They're tossed into a batter of flour eggs and a splash of ale, because water might as well be a dare in a world where streams double as sewers. The ale adds a faint fizz, a whisper of cheer that says, hey, life's rough, but at least we've got this. The vendor scoops the mixture, dropping it into the fat with a hiss that turns heads. The fritter fries fast, transforming into a golden puck with crispy edges that crunch like autumn leaves underfoot. You grab one, still so hot it burns your fingertips, and bite in. The outside shatters, giving way to a soft apple-stuffed centre, sweet and tangy, with a hint of that ale's bitterness. If you're lucky, the vendor might drizzle it with honey, or if they're showing off, a pinch of sugar, rare as a knight's kindness and twice as expensive. Either way, it's a fleeting moment of joy, a sugary escape from a diet of cabbage and regret. Kids swarm for these adults, haggle for seconds, and even the local birds circle eyeing your prize. Sure, sometimes the apples are sour enough to pucker your face, or the fat's been reused so often it tastes like last week's stew. But when it's good, it's divine a reminder that even in the grimmest times, people found ways to snatch a little happiness, one greasy bite at a time. Now let's wander to a quieter corner of that medieval market, where a farmer's stall sits under a sagging awning. The air here smells faintly of hay and something tangy like a barn left to its own devices. You're eyeing a pile of cheese curds, small pale clumps that look unassuming, but pack a surprising punch. These aren't the melty gooey cheeses of a modern pizza. They're the medieval equivalent of popcorn bite-sized and just squeaky enough to make you grin. In a world where snacks often meant stale bread or a dubious broth, these curds were a godsend, simple but satisfying, like a friend who doesn't talk much but always shows up. Picture the process: a farmer milks a cow or a goat if the cow's feeling moody, and the milk's turned into cheese faster than you can say plague. The curds are the fresh, early bits separated with rennet from some poor calf's stomach. No romance here, just practicality. They're lightly pressed, salted, and that's it, ready to eat. You pop one in your mouth and it squeaks against your teeth, a little rubbery, a little creamy, with a salty tang that hits just right. They're not flashy. No Instagram filter could save them, but they don't need to be. Monks nibble them between prayers, travellers stuff them in sacks for the road, and kids munch them like candy, assuming the cows weren't having an off day. You could fry them, crumble them into a stew, or just eat a handful while pretending you don't smell like the barn you slept in. What makes curds special is their ordinariness. They weren't saved for feast days or paraded at noble banquets. They were there day in day out, a reliable comfort in a world where fresh was a gamble. Sure, sometimes they tasted a bit off, freshness was more of a suggestion than a rule, but with enough salt and a shrug you didn't care. They filled your belly, kept you going, and in a pinch you could toss one to a stray cat or a sticky-fingered toddler to buy some peace. In the grand tapestry of medieval life, cheese curds were a small chewy thread proof that even the humblest things could bring a bit of joy. Step into a medieval kitchen now where a fire crackles and the air's heavy with the earthy scent of root vegetables. You're watching a cook, probably someone's aunt with a knack for making do, stare down a pile of turnips like they've personally offended her. Sugars are distant, dream apples are out of season, and yet the human urge for something sweet persists. Enter the turnip pie, a dessert born of desperation, and a stubborn refusal to let cabbage win. It's not glamorous, but in a world where treat usually meant not starving, it was a quiet revolution. Here's how it goes: you take those turnips, cheap, plentiful, and about as exciting as a tax collector's visit, and boil them until they're soft enough to mash. Mix in an egg for binding, maybe a dribble of honey if the bees were kind, or some dried fruit if the cook's feeling fancy. The whole mess gets stuffed into a crust of flour water and sheer willpower, then baked until it's, well, edible. At its best, it's warm, slightly sweet, with a pudding-like texture that's oddly comforting, like a hug from someone who doesn't quite know how to hug. At its worst, it tastes like someone tried to trick a cow's feed into dessert form, but the crust hides the evidence. You'd find these pies at village fairs or monastery tables where monks with too many turnips and too much time got creative. A sprinkle of nutmeg might sneak in if the abbey's flush, or a rogue raisin if the cook's feeling chaotic. Nobles wouldn't touch it unless they were play-acting as one of the people, but for everyone else it was dessert, or at least close enough. It was cheap filling and just sweet enough to make you forget the turnip's true nature. In a way, turnip pie was medieval optimism in pastry form. Take what you've got, slap some honey on it, and call it a win. And somehow, against all odds, people kept making it, proving that even the lowliest route could rise to the occasion. You're trudging along a muddy medieval road, the kind where every step feels like a personal insult from the earth. Your stomach's growling louder than the ox cart rattling by. And then you spotted a stall with a stack of golden steaming meat pasties, each one a handheld promise of warmth and satisfaction. These aren't just snacks. They're the medieval equivalent of a Hot Pocket, built for portability and survival. Whether you're a farmer heading to the fields or a spectator at the village's latest public squabble, a pasty's your ticket to a quick hearty meal. Grab one and let's peel back the crust on this crowd pleaser. Imagine the scene: a cook kneads dough with flour and water, maybe a dab of lard if they're feeling lavish, forming a sturdy pastry shell that could survive a fall from a horse. Inside goes the filling, and here's where things get creative. If you're near a lord's estate, you might score pork or mutton, proper chunks of meat that make your mouth water, but out here in the sticks, the definition of meat gets a bit stretchy. Think rabbit, pigeon, or if the cook's desperate, something that once waddled suspiciously like a hedgehog. It's diced, seasoned with a pinch of sage or garlic to mask any questionable origins, and sealed in that pastry like a secret you don't want to know. Baked over a fire, it comes out golden sometimes, a touch scorched with grease that soaks into your fingers like a badge of indulgence. Bite in, and it's a revelation, hot, savoury, with a crust that crumbles just enough to keep things interesting. The filling's a gamble. Tender one day, chewy the next, but it's always filling a calorie bomb that keeps you going through a day of hauling hay or dodging bandits. You eat it on the move, maybe while watching a juggler at the fair, the thick crust keeping the inside safe from the dust and chaos around you. Some folks carve initials into the pastry to claim theirs, especially miners who don't trust their mates. And that extra thick edge, hold it with your grubby hands and toss it to the rats or the spirits if you're feeling pious. It's greasy, it's mysterious, and it's everything you need to forget the turnips waiting at home. In a world where lunch could just be an onion and a prayer, the meat pasty was a small, delicious act of defiance. Step into a noble's hall now, where the air's perfumed with roasted meat and the faint jingle of wealth. Dinner's winding down and your breath's carrying the ghost of mutton and mead, not exactly a charming aftertaste. Enter candied fennel seeds, the medieval mint, a tiny sugary crunch that's as much about status as it is about freshening up. These aren't for the muddy-booted masses. They're a treat for those who can afford to care about their breath, served in delicate dishes that scream, "I'm better than you." You pop one, and suddenly you're part of the elite, even if your tunic's got a suspicious grease stain. Picture the effort behind these little gems. Fennel seeds, with their sharp licorice-like bite, get coated in sugar, a luxury that costs more than your average peasant's yearly wages. The process is no joke. Someone's boiling, beating and pouring that sugar by hand, layering it over the seeds until they're encased in a hard glossy shell. It's like crafting edible jewellery, each seed a testament to patience and coin. You toss one in your mouth, and it's a cautious affair too eager, and you're nursing a cracked tooth. The sugar hits first, sweet and intense, followed by that fennel kick, a flavour that's half fancy, half did I just eat a garden. It's weirdly satisfying, settling your stomach after a meal that included 3 kinds of bird and a questionable pie. These seeds aren't just snacks. They're multitasking marvels. They freshen your breath, help digest that heavy feast, and signal to everyone that you've got connections to far-off trade routes. Nobles pass them around after dinner, a polite way to say, "We're civilised here." Commoners might snag a honey-dipped knockoff at a festival, but it's not the same, no one's fooled. The real deal leaves a lingering sweetness, a fleeting illusion of refinement, as you step back into a world of mud and manure. Candied fennel seeds were small but mighty proof that even in the Middle Ages a little sweetness could go a long way if you could afford the dental bill. You're at a medieval wedding feast now, the kind where the whole village shows up with their best rags and their worst grudges. Tables groan under the weight of bread and ale, but the star of the show is the honey cake, a dense, sticky slab that's less dessert and more a declaration of joy. It's what happens when bakers get ambitious and sugar's locked away in some noble's vault. Honey, the people's sweetener, steps up, turning flour and water into something that feels like a gift from the bees themselves. Grab a slice if you can wrestle it free, and let's dig into this chewy marvel. The recipe's simple but fierce flour water, and a generous glug of honey stirred with a kind of determination that could fend off a wolf. If the household's got coin, they might toss in nutmeg or cinnamon spices that make the neighbours whisper about your wealth for weeks. Dried fruit raisins or figs might make a cameo, assuming the kids haven't swiped them for their own schemes. The batter's baked near the hearth until it's a firm golden brick, the kind that could double as a doorstop if the party gets rowdy. Cutting it requires a knife and a prayer. Eating, it's a workout, each bite sticking to your teeth like it's staking a claim. Take a chomp, and it's pure medieval magic, sweet dense with a warmth that feels like a firelit evening in your mouth. The honey's floral notes sing maybe with a hint of clove if the baker's showing off. It's not fluffy fluffs for dreamers, but it's satisfying a treat that laughs in the face of spoiled grain or rat-infested cupboards. You'd find these cakes at feasts, weddings, or as bribes to smooth over a feud. They're tough lasting days without spoiling, and they survive being dropped in the dirt or flung in a food fight. Your hands end up sticky, your heart a little fuller, and for a moment the world's not so bad. Honey cake was medieval comfort food at its finest, a reminder that even when life stung, sweetness could still win. You're standing by a medieval riverside where the air hums with the briny scent of fish and the sizzle of hot fat from a nearby stall. The vendors frying up fish skin, cracklings, those crispy salty strips that turn waste into wonder. These aren't the polished snacks of a modern bar. They're the gritty, efficient brainchild of some thrifty cook who looked at a pile of fish scraps and thought, why not? In a coastal town or a bustling market, these cracklings are the kind of treat that makes you forget the muddy trek home. Grab one still warm and let's crunch into this unexpected delight. Picture the process fishermen haul in herring or cod, their knives flashing as they gut and fillet. The meat's for stew, the head's for the cats, but the skins, those get tossed into a pan of bubbling oil, likely pig fat that's seen more action than a tavern brawl. The skins sizzle and curl, transforming from slimy discards into golden brittle shards that snap like dry twigs. A pinch of salt, maybe a daring sprinkle of herbs if the cook's feeling fancy, elevates them to something downright addictive. You bite down, and it's a burst of ocean essence, salty and rich, with a texture that crunches louder than the gossip at the market. It's not elegant, but it's honest, a snack that delivers more than it promises. These cracklings were a lifesaver for sailors, soldiers and peasants alike. Lightweight, packed with fat, they fueled long days of hauling nets or dodging tax collectors. You'd find them sold outside taverns where drunkards munched them like they were arguing with the noise in their heads. Sure, sometimes a stray scale sneaked in, or the smell could clear a room your hut might reek like a shipwreck for days. But in a world where fresh was a gamble and dysentery was a neighbour, these crispy bits were a triumph. They were cheap, they lasted, and they tasted like the sea had decided to throw you a bone. Fish skin cracklings proved that even the humblest scraps could shine, as long as you had enough salt and nerve. Now you're slouched by a medieval hearth, the fire spitting embers as the chill of evening creeps through the walls. Your stomach's rumbling, but the larder's down to a crust of bread hard enough to chip a tooth and a jug of ale that's seen better days. No problem, eat bread soaked in ale, the ultimate medieval hack for turning stale scraps into comfort food. Known as sops or trench toast, it's what you make when life hands you leftovers and a shrug. It's not fancy, but it's warm, hearty, and just messy enough to feel like a break from the grind. Here's how it works. You take that bread so tough it could double as a shield and dunk it into a bowl of ale. This isn't some artisanal brew with citrus notes. It's flat, murky stuff, brewed in a back room with the hygiene of a barnyard. The bread drinks it up, softening from jawbreaker to something you can actually chew. If you're lucky, you might sprinkle on some herbs or crumble in a bit of cheese, maybe a fried egg if the hens are feeling generous. You scoop a piece and it's a soggy, bready delight carrying the ale's bitter tang and a warmth that settles in your bones. It's not gourmet, but in the flickering firelight it's damn near perfect. This was the working class go-to, a quick fix for labourers too busy to fuss with knives or manners. You'd eat it straight from the bowl maybe while cursing the weather, or swapping stories about the local lord's latest tax. On feast days, a Spice-Dale might sneak in, giving it a kick that felt almost decadent. The beauty was its thrift-stale, bread-sour ale, no waste. It didn't travel well, turning to mush if you waited too long, but eaten fresh by the fire, it was a small rebellion against scarcity. Bread soaked in ale was medieval ingenuity at its finest proof. You could find joy in the dregs if you just added a little heat and heart. You're at a noble's banquet now, where candlelight dances on goblets, and the air's thick with the scent of roasted game and intrigue. The feast is winding down, and the host signals for sops in wine, a dessert so refined it feels like a performance. This isn't the peasant's ale-soaked bread. It's bread ideally toasted, never too stale, drenched in mulled-spiced wine, served with a spoon and a side of superiority. It's the kind of dish that makes you sit up straighter, pretending you're not eavesdropping on the Lord's whispered plots. Take a bite and let's savour this oddly decadent treat. The setup's simple, but fussy. Take good bread lightly crisped and plunge it into wine, warm, fragrant, maybe sweetened with honey, or spiked with cinnamon if the spice merchant's been kind. This isn't cheap tavern swill. It's the kind of wine that's been aging since last harvest, its richness clinging to the bread like a velvet cloak. The result is soft, almost pudding-like, with a deep boozy warmth that's both comforting and mildly intoxicating. You spoon it slowly, each bite a mix of soggy texture and spice sweetness, maybe with a rogue nut or dried fruit tossed in to keep things interesting. Done right, it's a gentle end to a heavy meal. Done wrong, it's just wet toast and no amount of cloves can save it. Sops in wine were for banquets, late-night feasts, or those awkward dinners where nobody wants to mention the king's latest blunder. Nobles called it elegant, while peasants, if they got a knock-off version with vinegar, just called it dinner. It wasn't finger food, you needed a spoon and patience, maybe a lute player to set the mood. For the elite, it was a flex proof they could afford wine good enough to waste on bread. For you, it's a taste of indulgence, a reminder that even in a world of mud and manure, a little spice and swagger could make you feel like royalty, at least until the dishes were cleared. You're tucked into a medieval barn, hiding from nosy siblings, or a nosier tax collector clutching a small cloth sack like it's treasure. Inside, dried fruit, raisins, figs, maybe a prune if someone's feeling exotic. These aren't the chewy packaged snacks of today's trail mix. They're medieval candy, tough as leather and sweet enough to make your teeth ache. In a world where sugar's locked in a lord's pantry and fresh fruits a fleeting summer fling, these shriveled morsels are pure luxury. Pop one in your mouth and let's chew through this sticky delight. Imagine the effort: fruits plucked at their peak, figs from a sunny hillside, grapes from a monk's vineyard are left to dry under the sun, or smoked until they're wrinkled time capsules of sweetness. No moisture, no rot, just concentrated sugar that hits like a revelation. You bite into a fig, and it's a battle chewy, dense with seeds that crunch like nature's dental test. The sweetness floods your tongue, but it's work your jaw, protesting as you wrestle the texture. Raisins stick to your teeth for hours, dates glue your mouth shut, and prunes. They're a gamble, half-treat, half-digestive dare. Eating them's loud, a performance that draws glares from across the room. These were special occasion snacks hoarded by monks, coveted by kids, and flaunted by nobles who might drizzle them with rose water to flex their wealth. You'd find them in pies stirred into porridge, or nibbled straight from the sack during a wedding or holy day. For commoners, a handful was a rare treat, savoured slowly in a quiet corner to avoid sharing. They kept well stuffed in pots or sacks, hardening into edible rocks over time, perfect for a long journey or a sibling skirmish. Dried fruit was sweet, stubborn, and faintly dangerous, a reminder that even in the grimmest winters, a taste of summer could linger if you had the teeth to claim it. You're at a bustling medieval fair where the air's thick with the scent of livestock and ambition. A vendor's skillet pops and hisses, turning heads with the promise of something hearty. Blood pudding balls, dark, crispy orbs of pure medieval grit are the star of the show. These aren't for the faint of heart. They're born from the no-waste ethos of a world where every scrap counts. Packed with protein and iron, they're the kind of snack that fuels blacksmiths or settles bets among bravado-soaked lads. Grab one still sizzling and let's roll into this bold bite. Here's the deal: after a pig's slaughtered, its fresh blood, maybe cow or sheep if pigs are scarce, gets mixed with oats, onions and fat spiced with whatever's on hand. Like pepper for the rich or sage for the rest. The mix is a grim, sticky porridge shaped into balls and fried in hot fat until the outside crisps like armour. You bite in and it's intense, earthy, rich, with a metallic tang that screams, "I'm alive." The crust shatters, giving way to a dense savoury centre that sticks to your ribs. Hot from the pan, they're a revelation. Cold, they're a test of your commitment. Nobles might pair them with ale and eggs, but for you, they're a quick grab between haggling and dodging pickpockets. These balls were fairground staples, cheap and filling, perfect for cold months when you needed warmth in your gut. They weren't pretty, some folks balked at the idea, others at the texture, but in a world where cabbage was king, they were a hero. You could carry them for days, eat them on the road, or scarf a few to power through a long shift. Sure, they weren't for everyone, but for those who got it, blood pudding balls were a badge of survival proof. You could turn even blood into something worth savouring. Dawn's breaking over a medieval village, and you're huddled by a fire, the cold nibbling at your fingers. The cook's got a griddle sizzling with pig fat, and the smell of batter hits you like a warm blanket. Medieval pancakes aren't your fluffy syrup-drenched stack. They're thin, tough, and fried in enough grease to make your heart reconsider its choices. But when breakfast is usually a sad bowl of gruel, these golden rounds are a treat that says today's going to be all right. Flip one onto your plate and let's dig into this universal crowd pleaser. The batter's no-nonsense flour, eggs and ale or water, stirred into a runny mix that's poured onto a hot iron griddle. No non-stick pans here, just lard and hope. The pancake cooks fast edges browning to a crisp, while the centre stays chewy, sometimes a bit raw, sometimes charmingly scorched. You bite in, and it's simple but soul-warming with a greasy tang and a hint of ale's bitterness if the cook went that route. Want to fancy it up, a smear of honey's pure decadence, or maybe some herbs for the adventurous. Most times, though, it's just you, the pancake, and a moment of peace before the day's chaos kicks in. These were everybody's food. Peasants wolfed them down, nobles layered them with cheese monks, ate them during Lent when meat was off limits. You could roll them up, dunk them in broth, or stack them like a makeshift cake. They were a loophole for fasting days, filling and just indulgent enough to feel like cheating. Leftovers. Good luck, they rarely lasted. Pancakes were the great equalizer, quick, to make easy to love and tough enough to survive a ride in your sack. In a world of hard labour and harder bread, they were a soft, greasy hug, proof that even the simplest things could spark a little joy. You're weaving through a medieval village fair, the air alive with laughter and the jangle of coins. Outside the church, a vendor waves stacks of wafers, their crisp golden edges catching the sunlight. These aren't your modern cream-filled treats. They're thin, delicate biscuits halfway between a snack and a sacred ritual. Sold hot off the iron, they're as much a part of the festive bustle as the jugglers and the ale. You snag one, its warmth tingling your fingers, and let's crack into this light, holy delight. Picture the craft, a batter of flour, water and eggs, maybe a whisper of honey if the baker's feeling generous, poured onto scorching metal wafer irons. Pressed tight, it cooks in moments, emerging as a brittle disc so thin it feels like edible parchment. Some bare imprints of saints or flowers, a nod to the churchgoers streaming out of mass, though the baker's probably just reusing an old mould. You bite, and it shatters with a satisfying crunch, tasting faintly of toasted grain and faith. It's not filling, but it's celebratory, a fleeting treat that doesn't weigh you down or wreck your purse. Wafers were everywhere, church steps, market stalls, even noble feasts where they'd be stacked with fruit or soft cheese for extra flair. Vendors hawked them by the dozen, their cries mingling with the clang of bells. They were fragile, crumbling under a stern glance, and transporting them was a gamble that ended in edible confetti. Yet they were beloved, a quick hit of joy for peasants and priests alike. You'd munch one while dodging a stray goat, feeling briefly like the world was kind. Wafers were medieval minimalism at its best, simple, crisp, and just sacred enough to make you forget the mud on your boots. You're seated at a noble's feast, the table gleaming with silver and smugness. As the meal winds down, a servant presents a tray of succulent, glistening sugar-coated fruits that look like jewels and taste like extravagance. This isn't the peasant's onion-heavy diet. It's elite-tier snacking reserved for those who can afford to drown fruit in syrup and call it a day. You pick a candied orange, its sticky sheen, catching the candlelight, and let's sink our teeth into this decadent treat. The process is a labour of love, or at least of someone's underpaid labour. Oranges, dates, or ginger are boiled in honey, or rare imported sugar drained and boiled again each cycle, locking in sweetness until the fruit's practically a candy hostage. The result is chewy and tense, and so sugary it makes your teeth hum a warning. You bite, and it's a burst of citrus or spice coated in a glossy crust that sticks to your fingers like a sweet crime scene. It's rich, almost overwhelming, a flavour that screams wealth and trade routes. Some suck it soft, served in ornate jars. Other pieces are dry, rolled in sugar like edible gems. This was special occasion fair weddings, royal visits, or just a Wednesday if you were absurdly rich. Passed around after banquets, it was a status flex, each piece saying I can afford this and you can't. Peasants might sneak a lick of the spoon if they were lucky, but sucket was for the elite, a sugary handshake among the powerful. You savour it slowly, knowing it's a rare escape from boiled roots and stale bread. Sucket was medieval excess in a bite proof that when you had enough coin, even fruit could become a flaunt-worthy masterpiece. You're at a medieval riverside market where the water glints and the air's thick with the smell of fish and frying fat. A vendor's tossing chunks of eel into a sizzling pan, each piece curling in the heat, like it's still got a score to settle. Fried eel's no niche delicacy. It's a star from peasant hearths to royal feasts, cheap, abundant, and crispy enough to make you forget its slimy origins. You grab a piece grease dripping like liquid gold, and let's dive into this slippery, savoury gem. Catching eels is half the adventure. They slither through streams at night, dodging nets like aquatic outlaws. Skinning them's a wrestle, like peeling a wet sock that fights back. Once chopped, they're seasoned, maybe pepper if you're fancy, salt if you're not, and tossed into hot fat. The skin crisps up golden and crackling, while the meat inside turns tender rich, with an oily depth that's part fish, part rebellion. You bite and it's a crunch, followed by a melt bones and all, with a flavour that's bold and unapologetic. It's greasy, sure, but in a way that feels like living dangerously on a Tuesday. Eels were everywhere, rivers teemed with them, and they snuck onto plates during fast days when meat was banned, winking at religious rules. Monks munched them, kings stuffed them into pies, and you'd scarf them at fairs or inns, spitting tiny bones into the dirt. They weren't pretty, and they might wriggle post-mortem, but fried right, they were a crowd pleaser. Each bite was a taste of the river, a reminder that even the weirdest creatures could become a feast. Fried eel was medieval magic, cheap, tasty, and just wild enough to keep life interesting. You're lingering at the edge of that medieval market, your fingers still sticky from honey cake, your mouth tingling with the memory of fried eel. The sun's dipping low, casting long shadows over the stalls, and the air's filled with the fading hum of bartering and laughter. You've tasted the grit and glory of medieval junk food snacks that turned scraps into joy, proving that even in a world of mud and toil, people carved out moments of indulgence. But now it's time to leave the sizzling pans and bustling fairs behind. Let's journey way back to a time when the night held more than just sleep, when dreams were messages from the gods themselves. Picture yourself in the ancient sands of Mesopotamia, where clay tablets held secrets and the stars whispered truths, ready to dive into a world where your dreams could shape empires. Hang tight, dim the lights, and let's drift into the mystic haze of ancient dream interpretation. You're sitting by a dying fire in a medieval hut, the crackle of embers mingling with the distant howl of a winter wind. Your belly's full of the ghosts of apple fritters, blood pudding balls, and those stubborn bits of dried fruit still lodged in your teeth. Medieval junk food wasn't just about eating, it was about survival ingenuity and snatching joy from a world that didn't hand it out freely. From the greasy crunch of fish skin cracklings to the sugary pomp of sucket, these snacks told a story of people who refused to let scarcity dim their spark. Peasants and nobles alike found comfort in a sizzling pasty or a squeaky cheese curd, proving that even in the darkest ages humans were stubborn enough to laugh, feast, and dream of something sweeter. As the fire fades, you realise these treats were more than food. They were tiny rebellions against a hard life, each bite a whisper of resilience that echoes through time. Now let's carry that spirit forward into the dreams and daring of ancient worlds yet to come. You're lying on a reed mat in ancient Mesopotamia, the Tigris River murmuring nearby under a sky thick with stars. It's 2500 BCE, and sleep isn't just rest, it's a portal to the divine. To the Sumerians, Akkadians and Babylonians, dreams aren't random flickers of the mind. They're telegrams from the gods, urgent and coded, demanding you pay attention. Ignore one, and you might as well snub Enlil himself, bad move. Welcome to a world where your nightmares could halt wars, or your daydreams crown kings. Settle in, maybe imagine the soft hum of a desert breeze, and let's unravel the mystic art of Mesopotamian dream interpretation. Picture a bustling city like Uruk, its ziggurats looming over clay brick homes. Your dream last night, a snake slithering through your house, has you rattled, so you seek a Baru priest, the ancient equivalent of a therapist with a direct line to the heavens. These priests aren't guessing. They're scholars trained in libraries stacked with clay tablets like the Ishka Zak, a dream manual that's part prophecy, part poetry. Eat dates in your dream. Good fortune's coming. Teeth falling out. Brace for family trouble. A goddess winking at you, you're either blessed or in for a divine smackdown. The system's precise, almost mathematical. See X, expect Y, yet it's steeped in a logic so divine it feels like starlight you can't quite grasp. Kings delayed battles over bad omens. Farmers skipped planting if a goat flew through their sleep. Dreams weren't just personal, they were the world's pulse, and you'd better listen with your eyes closed. In this ancient night, every dream's a message, and every sleeper's a messenger carrying whispers from the gods. You're standing at the threshold of a Mesopotamian temple. Its mud brick walls cool under the starlit sky of 2500 BCE. The air smells of incense and river silt, and your heart's pounding. You're here to seek a dream, not just any dream, but one from the gods themselves. In ancient Sumer or Babylon, this is no casual nap. It's dream incubation, a deliberate ritual to coax divine guidance from the night. Whether you're a king fretting over war, or a merchant lost in trade disputes the temple's your hotline to the heavens, step inside, let the flicker of oil lamps soothe you, and let's explore this sacred sleep. The process is meticulous, like prepping for a cosmic meeting. You fast for days, your stomach grumbling as you purify your body with river water and whispered prayers. The priests robed and solemn lead you to a chamber scented with myrrh, where a reed mat waits under a canopy of sacred symbols. You lie down, the world fading as incense curls around you, each breath pulling you closer to the divine. The goal? A vision clear vivid, packed with meaning. Maybe you'll see a lion signalling victory or a broken reed warning of betrayal. The priests have prepped the space to banish nightmares of drunken goats or other nonsense. This is serious business. Kings might sleep here to decide invasions, farmers to pick planting days. The gods they believe speak loudest in dreams, but only if you set the stage right. As you drift off the line between earth and ether blurs, and you're not just sleeping, you're navigating a realm where every image is a message, every whisper a mandate from the stars. You're in ancient Egypt 1550 BCE, reclining on a papyrus mat in a Nile-side village, the river's murmur lulling you towards sleep. In this world, dreams aren't fleeting fancies, they're sacred texts etched by God's ancestors, or your own car, the spiritual double that shadows your soul. Every night's a chance for a message, whether it's a blessing, a warning, or a divine to-do list. Egyptians don't shrug off their dreams. They study them like scribes poring over hieroglyphs. Close your eyes, imagine the warm desert breeze, and let's slip into the mystic world of Egyptian dream beliefs. By the New Kingdom, dream interpretation is an art captured in papyrus manuals like the Ramside Dream Book found in the dusty village of Deir el-Medina. It's no bedtime story, it's a divine diagnostic listing hundreds of dreams, with outcomes marked in red and black ink, good or bad. Dream of eating crocodile flesh. Congrats, you're destined for power, tied to Sobek's strength. See your reflection in a mirror. Trouble's brewing. Each entry starts. If a man sees himself followed by symbols drawn from centuries of ritual and cosmic logic. The reasoning's not always clear. Why does a falling star mean wealth? But it's rooted in a worldview where everything's connected, from Nile floods to the gods' whims. Priests hoard this knowledge, but even commoners whisper dream tales hoping for clues to their fate. Dreams aren't just personal, they're cosmic dispatches urging you to act, pray, or brace for what's coming. As you drift into sleep, you're not just resting, you're opening a channel to the eternal, ready to decode the god's next move. You're in a temple of ancient Egypt circa 1500 BCE, the air heavy with frankincense and the faint chant of priests. The stone walls glow faintly under torchlight carved with images of Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom. You're here for dream incubation, a sacred rite to summon visions that heal, guide, or reveal. In Egypt, temples aren't just for worship, they're hospitals of the soul, where sleep opens doors to divine intervention. You're seeking answers maybe for a fever or a family feud, so you lie on a low-bed heart, steady, ready to dream. Let the temple's hum wrap around you, and let's step into this ancient practice. The ritual's precise, you've bathed in Nile water, fasted until your head's light, and offered prayers to Serapis or Isis. Priests, their linen robes rustling, sprinkle you with sacred oils, murmuring spells to ward off bad omens. Your bed's positioned near a statue of the god, its stone eyes seeming to watch. The goal's a dream, vivid, direct, maybe showing a lotus for healing or a hawk for victory. This isn't superstition. It's healthcare rooted in the belief that gods speak through sleep. Wealthy supplicants might stay days awaiting visions. Commoners get one shot hoping for clarity. The priests stand by, ready to interpret a crocodile might mean power, a storm disaster. As you sink into sleep, the temple feels alive, a bridge between you and the divine. You're not just dreaming, you're petitioning the gods, trusting the night to deliver truths that daylight can't. You're drifting awake from an ancient Egyptian temple, the scent of frankincense still clinging to your senses, your mind buzzing with visions of crocodiles and lotuses. In Mesopotamia and Egypt, dreams were divine dispatches shaping fates and empires through the quiet of sleep. But now the stars wheel forward, and the sands of time shift to a new frontier. Picture yourself in 1860s America, where the vast Wild West stretches under a relentless sun. No gods whisper here, just the thunder of hooves and the grit of young riders racing against time. The Pony Express is about to gallop into history, carrying not dreams but letters that stitch a fractured nation together. Settle in, maybe imagine the creak of a saddle, and let's ride into a tale of speed, courage and connection. You're in St. Joseph, Missouri, April 3rd, 1860, where a crowd buzzes like a kicked beehive, their cheers drowning out the Mississippi's murmur. A young rider, barely old enough to shave, grips the reins of a restless horse, a leather mochila stuffed with mail slung over his saddle. This is the Pony Express, a daring gamble to shrink a sprawling continent with speed and grit. In a nation teetering towards civil war, where letters from east to west take weeks by ship or stagecoach, these riders aim to cross 2,000 miles of wilderness in just 10 days. Grab a spot in the crowd, feel the dust sting your face, and let's witness the first ride that changed America. The air crackles as Johnny Fry, the first rider, kicks his horse into a gallop, hoofbeats pounding like a heartbeat. Cannon's fire hats fly and the crowd roars as he vanishes into the horizon, carrying 20 pounds of letters, newspapers and telegrams bound for Sacramento. At the same moment, another rider bolts east from California, launching a relay that's half miracle, half madness. Between them lie deserts, mountains and hostile lands, with 190 stations where riders swap horses in under 2 minutes, never slowing. The mochila with its locked pouches slides from saddle to saddle, a symbol of a nation desperate to feel whole. 9 days and 23 hours later, the mail hits Sacramento, and newspapers call it a triumph, a proof that distance isn't destiny. You're watching more than a mail run, it's a pulse of possibility, a fleeting moment when teenage boys and tough horses outran the impossible, stitching a country together one gallop at a time. You're at a Pony Express station, a rickety outpost in the Nevada desert, 1860, where the wind howls and the horizon feels like a dare. A rider skids in dust, swirling, leaping from a lathered horse to a fresh one mochila in hand, gone again in moments. These aren't just couriers, they're the heartbeat of the Pony Express, young wiry daredevils who ride 75 to 100 miles, at a clip, facing death for a paycheck and a thrill. Barely 16 some as light as under 25 pounds. To spare the horses, they're the stuff of legend before they've grown a proper beard. Pull up a crate, smell the sweat and leather, and let's meet the boys who made history gallop. Imagine being one, you're a teenager, maybe an orphan answering a call for skinny fellows willing to risk death daily. You ride through blizzards, heat that fries your brain, or pitch black nights where every shadow's a bandit. Your gear, a revolver, a rifle, and a prayer. But speed's your real weapon, 10 miles an hour, no stopping. You swap horses at stations like this, one gulping water, if there's time passing, the mochila to the next rider without a breather. Some, like Pony Bob Haslam, ride into myth galloping 380 miles in 2 days' arrows in his flesh to deliver the mail. Others, like a young Buffalo Bill Cody, may be stretching the truth, claim their slice of fame. They earn $100 a month, a fortune for kids, but it's the rush that hooks them, the wind in your face, the sense you're knitting a nation together. Alone in the wild, you're not just a kid, you're a hero, your hoofbeats echoing in a country hungry for connection. You're crouched by a Pony Express trail in 1860, the Utah desert stretching endless under a sky that feels too big. A rider thunders past dust trailing like a ghost, his eyes scanning for trouble. These teenage couriers of the Pony Express didn't just race time, they danced with death, facing a gauntlet of perils that'd make most men quit before breakfast. From nature's fury to human threats, every mile was a gamble, and yet they rode mochila in hand through a land that seemed hell-bent on swallowing them whole. Hunker down, feel the grit in the air, and let's face the dangers that forged their legend. The wild itself was enemy number one. Blizzards in the Sierra Nevada could freeze you, stiff snow piling so high your horse stumbles into drifts. Cross the Nevada desert in summer, and the heat's a hammer baking your brain until you see mirages of rivers that aren't there. Thunderstorms turn trails to muck, rivers to torrents, one slip and you're drowning mochila and all. Then there's the wildlife wolves howling at your heels in the dark, rattlesnakes hissing from the brush, mountain lions stalking silently in the passes. But worse than beasts were men. Bandits knew the mochila might hold gold dust or cash, and they'd ambush a lone rider outnumbering his revolver's 6 shots. The Paiute War of 1860 turned trails deadly, stations burned. Keepers killed riders like Pony Bob Haslam dodging arrows to finish the run. Isolation was its own killer. A broken leg or a spooked horse could leave you stranded, no help for miles, just you and the vultures circling. Yet through it all, only one mochila was ever lost. These boys didn't just ride, they defied a world that didn't care if they lived their courage a beacon in the dust. You're in a bustling 1860s San Francisco saloon, the clink of glasses mixing with heated talk of war and union. The Pony Express, galloping through just months ago, has left its mark not just on trails, but on hearts and headlines. In a nation fraying at the seams with civil war looming like a storm, this relay of teenage riders did more than deliver mail. It proved a sprawling country could be one. Sit at the bar, smell the whiskey and sawdust, and let's unpack the cultural and political shockwaves of the Express. Before the Pony Express, California felt like another planet letters took weeks by sea, or stagecoach leaving the West out of sync with the East. But with mail zipping coast to coast in 10 days suddenly, San Francisco's reading Washington's news before it's stale, businesses strike deals faster, newspapers print near real-time updates, and families feel a little less like strangers across the divide. Politically, it's a lifeline. President Buchanan gets California's pulse during the tense lead-up to Lincoln's election, showing the West not just reachable but vital. The Express screams unity at a time when secession's a whisper, proving the federal government can bridge even the wildest frontiers. Culturally, its pure magic newspapers spin tales of daring riders turning boys like Pony Bob into instant heroes. Kids dream of saddles, not ships, and the nation finds a symbol of grit and possibility. You're not just hearing about mail, you're feeling a country pull itself together one hoofbeat at a time. The Pony Express didn't just shrink distance. It gave America a story to believe in, a fleeting triumph that said, "We're tougher than the land that divides us." You're at a Pony Express station in 1861, a lonely dot in Nebraska's plains where the creak of wood and the whinny of horses fill the air. The Express is winding down, but its hoofprints are carving a path for America's future. Beyond the thrill of its rides, the Pony Express laid economic and infrastructural roots that outlasted its 18 months, turning a wild gamble into a blueprint for a connected nation. Lean against the station's weathered wall, taste the dust on the wind, and let's trace the legacy that grew from these trails. Economically, the Express was a spark. Its stations, 190 of them strung like beads across deserts and mountains, became hubs for trade and travel. Merchants and settlers followed, bringing goods and dreams to places once too remote. The Express's routes showed where roads could go, guiding stagecoaches and freighters that fueled frontier economies. Those stations, crude as they were, marked spots for future towns, their corrals and wells laying groundwork for growth. Infrastructurally, it was a masterclass in logistics. The mochila's swift transfers, the relay system, the sheer audacity of crossing a continent in 10 days, it all proved what was possible. Those trails became lifelines for the transcontinental railroad telegraph lines and later highways, each building on the Express's map. The government saw the West as reachable, investing in rails and wires that owed their start to these teenage riders. You're not just seeing a mail run end, you're watching a nation's skeleton take shape, its bones forged by boys who rode faster than fear. The Pony Express didn't just deliver letters, it delivered a vision of America connected and unstoppable. You're in a dusty telegraph office in October 1861, the hum of wires cutting through the silence of a fading frontier. Just 2 days after the Pony Express launched its first daring ride, the Transcontinental Telegraph began its march. Poles, rising like sentinels across the plains. Now, 18 months later, the final wires strung, and Morse code's sharp clicks drown out the hoofbeats of teenage riders. The Express, heroic but doomed, is galloping toward its end, outrun by a technology that shrinks days to seconds. Sit by the telegraph key, feel the pulse of a new era, and let's witness the bittersweet fall of the Pony Express. The telegraph's rise was relentless. Starting in April 1860, wires stretched west from Missouri and east from California, each mile a nail in the Express's coffin. By October 24th, 1861, the line's complete, and messages flash coast to coast in moments rendering the 10-day mail run obsolete. That same day, the last mochila rides out its letters, a final echo of a fading dream. But the Express was already bleeding out its founders, Russell Majors, and Waddell sank $700,000 into a venture that never turned a profit. No federal contract could save it. Horses, riders, and stations cost more than the mail fees brought in. Yet there's no bitterness in the end. The Express proved rapid communication was possible, paving the way for the wires that replaced it. Riders scatter to new jobs, stations crumble or shift to other uses, and the nation turns to the future. You're not watching a failure. You're seeing a torch pass the gallop of horses, giving way to the click of progress, a fleeting legend that burned bright before bowing to the inevitable. You're in a packed 1870s theatre. The gaslights dim as a Wild West show unfolds, complete with thundering hooves and a rider clutching a mochila. The Pony Express, dead for a decade, lives larger than ever in America's imagination. Its 18 months of grit spun into a saga of heroism and frontier spirit. From dime novels to stage shows, the Express has become a myth, a symbol of a nation defining itself through courage and speed. Grab a seat, smell the popcorn and gunpowder, and let's explore how a mail run became a legend. Even as the Express ran newspapers painted its riders as daring knights of the plains, their mochila, a holy grail of connection. Boys like Pony Bob Haslam, who rode wounded through Paiute attacks, became folk heroes, their tales growing taller with each retelling. Buffalo Bill Cody, whether he rode or not, spun his own myth-parading express riders in his Wild West shows, cementing the image of a lone courier silhouetted against a sunset. By the 1880s, schoolbooks and novels cast the Express as America's epic, a story of unity in a country still scarred by civil war. It wasn't just nostalgia, it was identity, a way to claim the West's wild heart as part of the nation's soul. You're not just watching a show, you're seeing a country weave its story, turning teenage riders into icons of a frontier that felt both distant and eternal. The Pony Express didn't just deliver mail, it delivered a dream, one that still gallops through America's memory. You're standing by a bronze statue of a Pony Express rider in St. Joseph, Missouri. 2025 cars humming along a highway that traces the old trail. The Express ran for just 18 months, but its hoofprints are carved deep in America's story, a testament to human endurance and the hunger for connection. From statues to stamps, its legacy endures not just as history, but as a reminder of what it took to bridge impossible divides. Touch the statue's weathered base, feel the echo of hoofbeats, and let's trace the lasting impact of this fleeting venture. The Express's routes became America's arteries, highways, railroads, and bike paths now follow its trails, linking cities where stations once stood. Reenactments, museums, and postal service stamps keep the story alive, drawing crowds to relive the rider's daring. But the legacy's deeper than monuments. In 1860, communication meant risk boys braved deserts and bullets to deliver words. Today, with instant texts and global networks, the Express reminds you how hard connection once was, how each letter carried a piece of someone's soul. It's a tribute to a moment when speed came from muscle and grit, not wires or satellites. Figures like Pony Bob and Cody still inspire their courage, a spark for anyone facing their own frontier. You're not just looking at history, you're feeling the pulse of a nation that learned to outrun distance, a lesson that echoes every time you hit send. The Pony Express didn't last, but its spirit gallops on a beacon of what's possible when you ride toward the impossible. You're standing on a windswept plain, the ghost of a Pony Express rider fading into the dusk, his mochila, a fleeting symbol of a nation bound by courage and speed. The hoofbeats echo one last time, tying a fractured America together before wires and rails took over. Now let's turn back the clock far beyond the Wild West to the cradle of civilization itself. Picture yourself in ancient Sumer, where the Tigris and Euphrates cradle life, and a frothy brew isn't just a drink, it's a sacred gift, a liquid thread weaving through rituals, work and worship. Settle by a clay hearth. Imagine the yeasty tang in the air, and let's pour into the story of ancient beer, where every sip was a toast to the gods and the grit of humanity. You're sitting by a campfire under a star-strewn sky, the crackle of wood mingling with the memory of galloping hooves. The Pony Express, a fleeting 18-month sprint, wasn't just about mail. It was about defying the vast untamed West to prove a nation could be whole. Those teenage riders, barely old enough to vote today, faced blizzards, bandits, and loneliness their mochilas carrying dreams as much as letters. They stitched a country together, showing that courage and a good horse could outrun even the darkest divides. Their trails became railroads, their stations towns, their story, a myth that still sparks the American spirit. As the fire dims, you feel their legacy, a reminder that connection takes grit, that every message sent then or now carries a piece of human heart. The express galloped briefly, but its echo thunders on, urging you to bridge your own frontiers one bold step at a time. You're in a Sumerian village 1800 BCE, sprawled on a reed mat by the Tigris, where the air's thick with dust and the sweet yeasty scent of brewing. Beer isn't just a drink here, it's life itself, a staple as vital as bread, a currency, a sacred offering to the gods. The Sumerians don't sip it for fun, they worship it, pouring it in reverence to Ninkasi, the goddess of beer, whose name hums through every clay pot. This isn't your frosty modern pint, it's thick, cloudy, sipped through straws to dodge the grit, but it's the pulse of civilization. Settle in, imagine the warm clay under your hands, and let's dive into the divine world of Sumerian beer. Picture a bustling household where women, because brewing's their domain, knead barley into bapir, a special bread laced with honey or dates. It's crumbled into jars of water left to ferment under Ninkasi's watchful gaze, guided by a hymn that's both prayer and recipe etched on clay tablets older than empires. The result's a gruel-like brew, low in alcohol but rich in nutrients, safer than the river's murky flow. Workers guzzle litres daily paid in beer rations. Priests offer it to temple altars. Even kings toast with it. You sip through a reed straw, the tangy, grainy taste filling your belly, a liquid hug that says you're Sumerian. Beer's not just sustenance, it's community ritual, the glue of a society that turned mud and grain into cities. Ninkasi's gift flows through every jug, a reminder that even in ancient dust, humans brewed joy and divinity in equal measure. You're in a Sumerian courtyard 1800 BCE, where the sun bakes the mud brick walls and the air hums with the earthy tang of fermenting grain. A woman, her hands dusted with barley flour, tends a row of clay jars, stirring a murky brew with a wooden paddle. This is the heart of Sumerian beer making, a craft as sacred as it is practical, turning humble barley into a drink that fuels workers, honours gods, and binds a civilization. No shiny vats or lab coats here, just intuition, tradition, and a nod to Ninkasi, the beer goddess. Kneel by the jars, catch the yeasty whiff, and let's brew through the ancient process that made beer a cornerstone of life. It starts with bapir, a bread born for brewing, barley soaked, sprouted, and ground, then mixed with honey, or dates for sweetness, baked into dense loaves that smell like warm earth. These aren't for eating, they're crumbled into water-filled jars where the magic of fermentation kicks in. No one knows yeast by name, but they trust the air's invisible spirits, or maybe the jar's own residue to spark the fizz. The mix sits for days, stirred under the shade of palm fronds to keep it cool, turning into a cloudy, thick gruel, more meal than drink, with a tangy bite that sticks to your tongue. You sip it through a reed straw, dodging the sediment, and it's hearty, packed with nutrients that keep labourers swinging hammers, or scribes scratching tablets. Some batches are sweeter, others bitter, each one a gamble with nature's whims. This isn't just brewing, it's a ritual, a science of survival, crafting a beer that's as much food as beverage, a liquid lifeline in a land where water's dicey, and life's even dicier. You're in an ancient Egyptian brewery, 2500 BCE, near the Nile's glittering banks, where the clink of clay jars and the chatter of workers fill the air. This isn't a cosy pub. It's a state-run powerhouse churning out beer on a scale that dwarfs a village's dreams. In Egypt, beer's not just a drink. It's an economic engine woven into temples, palaces, and the sweat of labourers building pyramids. From taxes to wages, it flows through the kingdom like the river itself, a liquid currency that keeps the nation humming. Step into the shade of the brewery, smell the fermenting barley, and let's tap into the economy of Egyptian beer. Picture vast vats where emmer wheat or barley, half baked into crumbly loaves, is mashed with water and dates for sweetness. Women, often priestesses or temple workers, oversee the process, stirring and straining under the watchful eye of overseers. The beer, thick, sweet, sipped like porridge, fuels the workforce pyramid builders, gulp 4 litres a day, their rations as vital as bread. Temples brew for offerings to Osiris or Hathor, dedicating jars by the hundred, while palaces stock it for feasts. Breweries tie to granaries, their output taxed and tracked like gold, some even bartered when coins run dry. This isn't hobby brewing, it's industry with regional styles and trade routes carrying sealed jars to Nubia or the Levant. Beer's a job creator from grain farmers to potters, a web of labour that props up the state. You taste it gritty and nourishing, and feel its weight, not just a drink, but the pulse of an empire flowing from vat to tomb, sustaining life and glory alike. You're in an Egyptian tomb, 2000 BCE, the air cool and heavy with the scent of resin and stone. Hieroglyphs glow faintly under torchlight depicting jars of beer alongside bread and meat offerings, for a journey beyond death. In Egypt, beer isn't just for the living, it's a ticket to the afterlife as essential to the soul's voyage as prayers or amulets. Tombs brim with it, real jars or painted ones ensuring the deceased never thirst in the eternal fields of Osiris. Kneel by a painted mural of brewing, feel the sacred hush, and let's pour into the spiritual role of beer in the Egyptian afterlife. The belief runs deep, the K or spiritual double needs sustenance to roam the duat, the underworld's shadowy maze. Beer thick and nourishing is stocked in tombs, sometimes actual jars, sometimes magic replicas conjured by spells. Murals show women brewing their vats, a promise of endless supply, while inscriptions list offerings for gods like Hathor, who loves a good brew. It's not just practical, its cosmic beer ties you to the cycle of life, death and rebirth, its fermentation a mirror of eternal renewal. Pharaohs get golden goblets of refined brews, commoners make do with clay pots, but the idea's the same, no afterlife's complete without it. You imagine sipping that gritty, date-sweet beer in a sunlit field, you're K-content. It's not just a drink, it's a lifeline to eternity, a sacred elixir that carries you from Nile's banks to the stars, proving even death can't quench an Egyptian's thirst for life. You're in a Sumerian temple, 2000 BCE, where the air shimmers with incense and the low chant of priests. A clay jar of beer, frothy and fragrant, sits on an altar, an offering to Ninkasi, goddess of brewing. In ancient Sumer and Egypt, beer isn't just a drink, it's a bridge to the divine, a liquid prayer that binds mortals to gods. From temple rituals to raucous festivals, its fermentation is seen as a mystic act, transforming grain into sacred elixir. Stand by the altar, breathe in the yeasty warmth, and let's delve into the spiritual heart of ancient beer. In Sumer, brewing begins with hymns to Ninkasi, her presence invoked as bapir bread ferments in jars. Priests pour beer as libations, letting it soak into the earth for gods like Enlil, or share it in sacred feasts, believing each sip aligns them with cosmic rhythms. In Egypt, beer's even deeper in the divine weave temples, brew vats for daily offerings to Hathor, goddess of joy, who's said to have saved humanity with beer dyed red as blood during the festival of drunkenness. Worshippers down it in her honour, blurring the line between mortal and mystic. Funerals, harvests, solstices all pulse with beer poured for the dead or drunk to celebrate life. You taste it thick and gritty and feel its weight, not just nourishment, but a communion with the eternal. Beer's no mere beverage, it's a ritual, a gift from gods that turns every gulp into a whispered prayer, binding earth to sky in a frothy embrace. You're in a Mesopotamian field, 3000 BCE, the Tigris glinting under a relentless sun. Farmers bend over barley stalks, their sweat mingling with the fertile silt. Beer, that cloudy lifeline sipped in every home, might be why they're here at all. Some say the thirst for it drove humans to settle and sow. In Sumer and Egypt, barley's not just food, it's the key to brewing a crop that sparked villages, tools and empires. Wipe the dust from your brow, smell the ripe grain, and let's dig into how beer shaped ancient agriculture. Barley's a star for a reason. Its sugars ferment easily, unlike fickle water sources that breed disease. Farmers domesticate it, learning to store and grind it for bapir bread, the backbone of beer. This isn't casual gardening. It demands irrigation, canals, clay sickles and granaries, forcing people to stay put and work together. Brewing itself is a science jar's hearths, and timing turn grain into sustenance that lasts longer than bread. In Sumer cities like Uruk-Hum with breweries, their beer rations fueling labourers and scribes. Egypt's Nile fields feed vast breweries, their output taxed like treasure. Trade follows with beer jars sailing to distant lands, swapping for wool or oil. You crush a barley stalk, imagining its journey to a frothy jar, and see it beer didn't just feed people. It built systems from fields to markets, rooting civilization in the earth. It's not a byproduct. It's a pillar, proving a mug of beer might have sown the seeds of human history. You're in a Sumerian kitchen, 2500 BCE, where a woman kneads barley dough by a flickering hearth, her hands steady with generations of know-how. In ancient Sumer and Egypt, brewing beer isn't a man's trade, it's women's work, a sacred craft passed from mother to daughter like a whispered spell. Far from a chore, it's a role of power